We see Myles Garrett going from Cleveland to Canton. Andrew Berry's words many weeks ago. Never wavered, never turned, never doubted, even as Garrett's camp came after the Browns in more ways than one. Well, today it's official. What most of us here at the OBR kept saying, how this is going to end, Myles Garrett is going to sign a contract, the largest contract for a defensive player in NFL history, and it just happened. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, Browns 3D starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR, brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, of course, also from the OBR, Pete Smith. I told you, look, if there was going to be news over the weekend, there was no way we'd really, just leave you guys in alert. You guys have been so good to us, certainly since the season's ended over the last couple of weeks here. So with, huge breaking news like this, extra episode, sure. Extra episode. Why not an extra episode, right? Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns have agreed to a contract extension. The money is probably somewhere in the range of $123 million guaranteed. The officials of it, let's give it a couple of days till it's all out in black and white. We can have our good buddy, Jack Duffin, break out, his lens, go through all the fine points and explain it to you further. I think for me, one of the most impressive, probably ironic parts of this contract extension is the full no trade clause. Kind of interesting, I thought, there as well. First off, I've seen plenty through social media for Pete and probably a bunch of other of us here at the OBR, the fact that we didn't waiver. Now, look, the job is to give opinions, but the job is to give opinions and basically have some merit to them and some factual backing up. Otherwise you can just throw opinions out and they don't mean anything. You have to have something there. There was nothing there concrete that ever made any sense for the Cleveland Browns to even entertain this move. And especially, a couple of days ago when Joel Bitonio said he was going to return. When that came out, it kind of told you the Browns weren't going to change things. It could have been, hey, Joel, let's just see. We might have to get this put to bed first one way or the other, and then we'll see where we're at. They didn't waver. And, like I told you when I left you all on Friday, Garrett didn't get the meeting with Jimmy Haslett. I told you. I didn't think that was a meeting Myles Garrett probably didn't want to go into. Nobody wants to hear their $100 million employee tell you that they are unhappy. Jimmy's unhappy. And, it's just the way it was going to go. But cooler heads prevailed. And look, I still, right now, I'm not sure how there was a market, of course. But once you got down, if the Browns really sat down with somebody and said, okay, combination of 4 to 5 high picks, great players, and Myles Garrett camps could have told you whatever they wanted. They wanted the money. They absolutely wanted the money. And not a lot of teams who are contending can afford 4 to 5 top players and picks and then add a contract of the value that Myles Garrett just got. Pete, we win some, we lose some. This was definitely one we came out on the right side of.
Yeah, I think part of it was the fact that if in order to trade Garrett, you would have had to have moved a whole bunch of other players and
just purged it, literally purged it.
Well, beyond the whole, it's not like the Browns were just going to announce, hey, we're releasing Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller, and, we intend to trade Denzel Ward, and all these other players. Like, those are conversations you have to have with an agent. And the Browns, one, weren't willing to get rid of all those players because why would they? And then two, they weren't willing to burn the bridges with all those agents that, I've kept sort of phrasing it in terms of the Browns were not going to blow up their roster because one player wasn't as happy as he could be. And that's ultimately how this thing went. And I've looked at this and I've sort of seen it as, yes, Garrett wanted out. And if it was up to him, he'd still want out. And his agency, Clutch, I suspect, saw an opportunity to try to greatly improve their sort of strength in the marketplace and change the NFL landscape the way they have in the NBA, where Rich Paul has been as impactful as any person in the NBA over the past 2 decades. So if they were able to get Myles Garrett out of Cleveland, it would have been a huge deal for them, for the league, and increased their business substantially and made them potentially the most powerful sort of agency in the league, which is where they may end up anyway. But none of the stuff they were doing was working. And like this latest stuff, talking about Tom Pelissero, you're releasing that Jimmy Haslam was unwilling to meet with them. And then almost like minutes later, Mary Kay coming out, and Mary Kay Cabot of the Cleveland.com saying, yeah, he told them to talk to Andrew Berry, immediately backfired. And there are still people who are trying to run with this and say the Browns are bad for this. This is Jimmy Haslam has done so many things wrong in his tenure of owner. He nailed this. He nailed it. He backed his GM. He avoided this whole, going to one parent and then trying to play the other parent against them and trying to create sort of a divide that ultimately gets what you want. They did it right. And that's how it should have been. And then, the other stuff that like Aditi came out with looked just as bad as the Browns, talking about how, the offensive players weren't, in his mind, weren't providing the same effort, which, by the way, not wrong. In some respects, I mean, Deshaun Watson sucked the life out of this team in so many ways, but you are quite literally throwing your team under the bus in that scenario, which isn't a good look for anybody. And then bringing up the specter of, well, he could walk away and do all this other stuff. Yeah, that was his only leverage point. But so he gets traded to another team and then it doesn't work out the way he hopes. Is that the move then? Or are we going to constantly go, I'm going to threaten to take my ball and go home? It just doesn't work. So ultimately, I think after trying to get these varying points of leverage, I'm curious to know if the agency basically said, Clutch said, look, man, we've tried everything we can do. We got nothing. So we can go ahead and get this deal done, or we can continue to waste time, but we don't look good. You don't look good. Why don't we just hammer out a deal? And I think ultimately that's where this thing got done. Now, that doesn't change the fact that there is work to be done between Myles Garrett and the Browns and their players in general, and Myles Garrett with his teammates. The contract is a huge, huge deal and now facilitates that those things need to happen. But now they've got to put in the work to do those things to sort of mend fences and everything else with that. But it's still a massive win. And you get into the details of why it's so important. It's March 9th. The legal tampering period starts tomorrow. We're recording this on Sunday. It's going to start on the 10th, on Monday. We're going to get this thing rolling. And Myles Garrett, whatever you want to say about him, he appears true to his word. He wants to win championships. This signing says, I want to win championships, because it eliminates any possibility that he's going to screw his team that he's going to be a part of. So now he has given players and agents across the league the green light to say, yeah, you can go ahead and sign in Cleveland. And that gives them a huge advantage. So, and it also does the other thing, which I think Garrett wants out of this, and I think everybody wants. I think this is the one part where everybody can sit there and go and hope Garrett is this, which is to say that I think they want Garrett to be the instrument that puts this front office on blast, in the sense of, how in the hell did you decide to acquire Deshaun Watson and back this thing, which is such an utter disaster? Like, this puts pressure on them. And granted, they have pressure by virtue of the fact that their job is not safe and everything else. But if you're asking Andrew Berry, I'm sure he's sitting there going, I welcome this pressure because I got the biggest thing I needed to get done. And it makes the other things I have to do, signing a quarterback, continuing to build the team to be competitive, just a little bit easier. And I welcome that pressure. But those are all good things. And then the last part, which is my favorite part that no one wants to talk about, is the Browns have put the Steelers and the Bengals in a awkward position, and the Cowboys. But more importantly for them, they're two AFC North division rivals. I don't think it's a huge deal for the Steelers, but here's the issue. Micah Parsons wants a new contract with Dallas. TJ Watt is due a new contract, and they're currently negotiating one in Pittsburgh. Max Crosby just signed a new deal, which is reportedly worth $106.5 million over 3 years, which is average of $35.5 million. Garrett's deal approximately $40 million a year. If Watt and Parsons had signed their deals first, Garrett's camp would have wanted to be the highest paid player. So if they let's say Parsons got that $40 million deal, then Garrett's price went up. Now the converse is also probably true. If Parsons is insistent, I'm getting $1 more than he got. Well, now they have to do this. And we saw this play out before when the Browns extended Myles Garrett for $125 million over 5. They beat the Chargers, who waited an extra year on Joey Bosa for no good reason. And then they signed him to a 5-year, $135 million deal. $10 million is $10 million. So you get to use on something else. So now Pittsburgh and TJ Watt, presumably, the impact, difficult to truly measure it, but chances are those agents just went, well, we want just a little bit more money than we did 5 minutes ago. The bigger issue is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals and their fans are already freaking out.
Yes, they are.
Because Jamar Chase wants to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. And the Cincinnati Bengals had an opportunity to sign Jamar Chase last year and could have gotten him at a very reasonable rate.
And he could have at least held the title for 5-6 months. Yes.
He was going to be that guy. And the Bengals came back and said, we don't negotiate with rookies who are only, I think, 3 years into their rookie deal. So they said, we're waiting another year. Okay, well, cool. And then you come back and you didn't get the deal done. And now Garrett's done. And now Jamar Chase's camp is not going to sit there and go, oh, I guess we'll take less now. They're going to sit there and go, we want to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. And now it puts the screws to them. That's not even all of it. Because T. Higgins is sitting there with a franchise tag going, I want my contract too. And this was the whole thing. Joe Burrow is publicly going around saying, please pay players on this team. I hate this, and I want my guys to stick around. The Bengals have already released some players. They've got their best defensive player on the team on the trade block for reasons that make no sense because they're poor. They are broke. And Mike Brown doesn't want to deal with this. So he's potentially going to trade Rob Peter to pay Paul to do all this. So now they're stretched even thinner. So the Browns sit here and put pressure on everybody else. They're done. They have all this other work to do. And all these other teams are sitting and go, man, this is a giant pain in our butts because we thought this was going to drag out for months and months and months. And now we have to sort of deal with it.
And I think one of the things, and probably this is where it came through for Clutch at least, was, Myles, we love you. You're our top guy. But we have a lot of other clients. And come Monday morning, we can't just have 100% of our focus on you. And look, this was there. Everyone, we knew the Browns. Myles Garrett played 3 years on a deal. And before he even started making that money on that deal, he was already dropped down the ladder as far as being the top overall paid player. He never even was paid as the top overall player by the time he got to that deal. In year 2, he won Defensive Player of the Year. In year 3, he was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. There was no doubt. Everyone knew the Browns. It was going to get re-upped anyway. It was the surprise and how all this went around. But at the end of the day, there was just no way when a guy like Andrew Berry tells you year in, year out, I want to put out a competitive roster. That told you all you needed to know. I'm not trading you because you know what? If this is what we try to do, and look, everybody, yeah, it doesn't always work out. But the point is to put yourself in the position that it hopefully works out. He wasn't going to waver on that, especially where he and Kevin Stefanski might be right now as far as a job being secure. We're going to continue on here. A little more thoughts on this. But look, it's going to kick off tomorrow. And now it turns to what is certainly the be-all, end-all, is trying to come up with a quarterback. We've been talking for a couple of weeks now, and we're super excited. They've been really, really good to us. State Sharpening, Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights. If you're local to Cleveland, they are your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Listen, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Browns, maybe even early morning Sundays, maybe even Thursday nights, whatever. You want your grass taken care of. That's why you got to check out State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. They specialize in both residential and commercial equipment for Toro, the brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you're looking for a new, dependable time cutter, zero turn, genuine Toro replacement parts, or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower in peak condition, State has got your back. Veteran owned, the Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders, lifetime Browns fans, and big supporters of us here at the OBR. Again, if you are local to Cleveland, State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at statesharp.com, STATSHARP.com. Now, Pete, one of the things I focused on Friday, and this was one that just, the Browns are a trash organization because they're not going to re-sign Nick Chubb, which is not what they said. They said they're going to let Nick Chubb explore the market. We went through this years ago with Jarvis Landry. You don't want to embarrass somebody you have a relationship. Hey, we're not sure what your market is right now. Let's go out, find out what your market is, and we'll talk from there. 2 days later, the Browns are a trash organization because they won't trade Myles Garrett, who's still under contract for 2 years, still could have had 2 more years under a franchise tag, and the entire time they were willing to pay him. But this is, and look, one of the things, and look, I've only been over here at the OBR now for a couple of months. But the point is, clicks are great, reads are great, views are great. They all pay the bills. But you have to feel like you're putting out truthful content. And a lot of this, and how many times did you guys hear all last week in regards to this? How many people nationally and many locally ever brought up the fact that the Browns would basically have no capital monetarily to maneuver with for this franchise in 2025? No. It was all about how they were trapping. He was a hostage at $20-something million. He was going to make all of these things is what you heard about all this. And now the backtracking. Oh, well, Jimmy Haslam just threw money at this situation. No, they were always going to pay Myles Garrett. And now it's all the backing up. And, maybe in a day or two, you'll get a couple of retractions or you'll get a couple of statements saying, well, the Browns, they did what they had to do because otherwise, their finances would have been screwed, which is basically what everybody here has been telling you for weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the Chubb thing, we'll see what's going to happen on that. It would not surprise me if we just saw the Aaron Jones deal. It's not a highly regarded free agent class at running back. It wouldn't surprise me if this thing drags on through the draft because it's a historic class. But, I think the Browns have basically left the door open for Chubb based on what we're reporting. It's just a question of what does he really want? My expectation at this point is still that he's going to end up back in Cleveland. But we shall see on that.
So, I wasn't trying to go obviously into the realm of talking about Nick Chubb here. Obviously, this was more into just, how things are being perceived and the way these things are being spoke on. It's basically straight 4 clicks and it's basically straight, in the LOL Browns, which again, I can't stand it. And look, I've been here since 2017 covering this team. This franchise is drastically a different product than it was in 2017. And when they told you each and every step along the way, no interest, no interest, no, zero interest. And it was Radio Row. It was the Combine, the shenanigans that went on Friday, which was basically a Hail Mary. And, I'm sorry if anybody's into creating anime. I don't think it pays as well as maybe you think it does because, Myles Garrett decided you have to crawl on back to football and play that. But at the end of the day, this organization that everybody looks at and tries to claim is so weak and feeble. And look, I ain't saying they're perfect. I never said the way this is run is perfect. But what they told you every step of the way in regards to this situation, again, did not waver, did not, change stance, did everything they said they were going to do. And in regards to what you're saying, Pete, yes, this now has influences on agents. Yes, more of it is, oh, Myles is going to be there. Oh, yeah, Cleveland's on the board. I have interest in going there. But more of it is being open and honest, and certainly don't get any much of this in professional sports, but they didn't waver. They told you exactly how they wanted to handle this. And, a lot can be said, as much as the world changes, business changes, that and the other thing. open and honest, sometimes is going to get it done.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the Browns have been better than most teams about sticking to their word on some of this stuff, because you look at like what Seattle did, where GM came out and said, we're not, Geno's our guy, Geno's our guy. And then they ship him off for a 3rd-round pick to the Las Vegas Raiders. But so much of this came down to incentives for the Browns. But there is a perception being reality element with the Browns, the fact that they're 3-14 and everything else. And the Browns have done so much wrong with some of these things that, that there are people who sort of operate on the theory that the Browns are there at the behest of everybody to help the other 31 teams. So there's that element of it. And obviously it's more entertaining and gets you more traction or listeners, whatever, to talk about player movement than actually what's happening, which is, the NBA is built on speculation of trades. The NBA is more popular in many ways when, it has nothing to do with playing on the court than what might be. It's always talking about what's going to happen next year or what could happen. Whereas the NFL obviously has more popularity with what's going on with that. But the Browns have been pretty good for the most, sticking to their guns. But even, the reporting has said the Browns were unwilling to move on this whole thing. So I don't know. I mean, that part ultimately doesn't matter to me. It just, to me, I think everything is easier to view through incentives than anything else. And that's why, honestly, the Geno Smith trade surprised me, just because Seattle doesn't have another quarterback. So it was odd to me that they were going to blow a hole in their roster that they don't have sort of solved. Whether they get Sam Darnold or not, it's just sort of like you've blown this whole thing open. Not, ignoring the fact that the other part that's interesting with Seattle is the fact that Seattle got the dream scenario where they were ready to move on from Russell Wilson, traded him for 2 1s, 2 2s, some other stuff, 3 players, and 2 years later they are blowing up. Won't say the whole roster, but they're getting rid of Lockett. They're potentially moving on from DK Metcalf. They lucked into Geno Smith, who was great for them, and they did all this. Got all this for Russell Wilson, who went to the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos gave up all these assets. Russell Wilson was terrible for them. They moved on and are already in a position to contend and are in a better position right this second than Seattle is, which is crazy to think about. But it goes to show that, there's always this dream of, well, if I get 1 million draft picks, I'm going to make this thing work, which in theory makes a whole lot of sense, but it doesn't necessarily translate. It's not even to say that Seattle necessarily blew those picks. Devin Witherspoon's a hell of a player, and they ended up being the 5th pick in the draft they got out of that trade. The Browns were always in a situation where they're probably getting a couple first-round picks late in the draft, or maybe even if it was 3 first-round picks, they're going to be super late. It was always going to be really difficult, and this wasn't even a 4 quarters for $1 situation. You were going to take a depressed value on everything, and it just made no sense. Now, with all that said, they're keeping this thing. They're keeping Denzel Ward. They're keeping Jack Conklin. They're keeping Joel Bitonio another year. They're keeping Wyatt Teller, and all these guys need to play better and stay healthier. But they are going to they're not going to stop aging. So they've got a little bit of pressure of them to sort of figure this thing out. But here's the thing, we knew that anyway. Especially with Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller and Jack Conklin and this offensive line, even if Deshaun Watson was everything that the Browns hoped he would be, there was still going to be this process of needing to get younger and more cost efficient on the offensive line. And that's still going to be a pressure on this draft to do those things. The difference is they still have to find a quarterback. That's the one big sort of meatball hanging out there, but everything else basically remains the same.
Well, seeing as you brought up the big hanging meatball, and I would say the first red X, obviously, Geno Smith traded. And the first things first with Geno Smith, and I'm not really getting into this much, but just Geno going to the Raiders, a lot of people, Russell Wilson to the Raiders. Well, why would Pete want Russell Wilson when he let Russell Wilson go to play Geno Smith? My other thing, though, is I do wonder how much Seattle tried. Because it did just seem like very quick, easy, and I guess 92nd pick overall or whatever. You would wonder, with a whole bunch of thirsty quarterback teams in the league, how many phone calls did Seattle make in regards to Geno Smith? But there's your first red X. automatically, everybody automatically just thinks that Sam Darnold is going to Seattle. Obviously, there's nothing there concrete in stone. You would think Seattle would be willing to pay big in free agency because where they draft obviously is going to take them out of, well, at least the top name. I don't know about the second name necessarily, as far as the quarterback position is concerned. But Pete, we shift our eyes now. Now, this is obviously what the plan is. And look, Atlanta, you can say whatever you want. You owe Kirk Cousins an extra $10 million. I believe that's by Friday. Kirk Cousins is not going to sit around, on stacks of $100 bills and watch Michael Penix play any more than you want him sitting around on stacks of millions of dollars watching Michael Penix play. So Atlanta, I do not believe you. Kirk Cousins will be made available. How do you think it will shakes out here, Pete? Obviously, we've been having these conversations, probably about 2 months now. How do you think it truly works out that where is the veteran go-to for this team? Maybe not necessarily tomorrow. I remember everything kicks off tomorrow at noon. Everybody from the OBR will be around. We got everything covered every which way but loose. Probably adding an extra show tomorrow night. How does this shake out, Pete?
So I think Kirk Cousins is Sunday, the 5th day of the league year, and the league year doesn't.
I think it's the 15th. I check me on my maybe that's Saturday. I don't even know what day of the week. I know it's Sunday.
But
today's the 9th. So Saturday.
So my concern there is I think if the Falcons are determined to sort of wait this thing as long as possible, even if they cut him like at the midnight hour of sort of before they have to pay him, he's going to be at a slight delay of everybody else. And I don't think the Browns are going to be able to afford to wait. If they try their hand at other quarterbacks and then sort of fall back into Kirk Cousins, that's fine. But I think the Browns are going to try to go and my belief is that they're going to try to and potentially land Daniel Jones. If we follow the whole Sam Darnold thing going, if he goes to Seattle or Tennessee or whatever, either way, he's going to make a ton of money. The Vikings are making noise that they'd like to keep Daniel Jones in Minnesota. My suspicion is that they're willing to pay more for Daniel Jones than a lot of teams would for a backup quarterback because they were willing to pay it to Darnold. Why wouldn't they pay it to ensure the situation behind their rookie J.J. McCarthy? But Daniel Jones wants to start. He wants to go somewhere and be.
Who can blame him?
The only hitch, and why I think ultimately he's going to end up here, is he does not want to be in a situation where he just gets he's very temporary. And all these people are talking about, well, what are the Browns going to do at the top of the draft? I don't believe they're going to trade up. They could, but I don't believe they're going to go from 2 to 1. I think they're going to sit there, and my bet at this point is still Abdul Carter, taking him second. Titans, if they don't get Darnold, I suspect they're going to go ahead and just take Cam Ward. The Browns take Abdul Carter, and then the Browns will try to get another quarterback somewhere in that draft. But I think they want to get a veteran that can win football games. Now, I as much as I think they really do like Cam Ward, I don't think they want to be in the business of saying we need the rookie to carry us to wins, or basically saying to the ownership, look, we didn't win like we wanted to, but our rookie quarterback looks really great, doesn't he? Don't fire us. I think their primary focus is going to be, we've got to make this thing win. We believe with better quarterback play, and they have all the reasons in the world to back this up based on 2023 to say we just need to be good enough. I think they are ultimately going to end up with Daniel Jones. There are a couple other names that I think are going to be interesting that might fit in a world where the Browns aren't entirely sure what they want to do at the top of the draft yet. Mac Jones, I think, makes a ton of sense. Not a guy getting a lot of talk, but I think he's a guy that could be really interesting because all he wants is a shot to compete. He's not really hardlining about, I insist you not do the other thing. That makes it really interesting. And then, the wild card out there is going to be Justin Fields. If the Steelers can't get this thing done, what's going to happen? And this is, obviously the Jets have expressed interest, but, you have an offensive coordinator who coached Jalen Milroe, who's super athletic. He understands sort of how to make that thing work. The Browns, what would be a 26-year-old Justin Fields, with all the inconsistency and everything else, basically go, we've seen enough where we think he's ready to turn a corner and be a more consistent quarterback. And then sort of bet on the tools because of all the players that are going to be available in free agency, I don't think it's difficult to argue that Justin Fields still offers the most upside. Now, the floor is super low, and
course.
it could be a disaster. But if you're betting on the upside and you want to set up a quarterback room that's interesting, of Justin Fields is like a Jalen Milroe type situation, that would be an interesting thing. That's one where I think you're just sort of monitoring it as opposed to saying they're definitively going to go after this thing, because it would not shock me, given the desperation of teams, if somebody's willing to pay. And part of the reason I don't think he's signed yet, I think that Fields camp has a pretty good feel that somebody's willing to give probably too much money to their quarterback and potentially get it done. And that may scare the Browns off, but that's at least interesting.
And I think that could also possibly be the reservations with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers could think they have a bottom line and, we got the best out of them. This is the best opportunity for him. But other people see and say, hey, you know what? He got him to 4-2. Was he playing lights out? No. But you found a way to use him and kind of make him somewhat useful and still have a chance where you were successful. And, he played till 4-2 before Russell Wilson got in there. Daniel Jones, Jalen Milroe. Look, I think this is one thing that, and it goes back to the Watson acquisition 3 years ago. Sorry to, bring up a hat nightmare to anybody. But I do think there was a concentrated effort there, Pete, to add some athleticism to the quarterback room. And you saw with, the Dobbs moves and the DTR moves. I think, they were trying to see, and look, we're not talking about these guys like they are athletic, like Lamar Jackson or, Jaden Daniels. But I do believe there was a belief there. They were trying to, get their cake and eat it too. But they were just trying to see, hey, if we can find the guy that can do what we need him to do as far as a thrower, and we can also find a guy who can offer a little bit more with his legs, yeah, that's something we're interested in. And all of a sudden, if it was a Jones or a Fields and a Milroe, you're in that basically arena.
It's just where the league is going. Like, was very difficult.
Well, just real quick, it was Cam Newton who taught on his own pod or whatever. And he said up until like 7th grade, he had never played quarterback. And then it was like, well, they put him in shotgun and he just ran. Then they started to teach with him and work with him how to throw. Why? Because he was the best athlete. And so now, you're behind the 8 ball if you don't have the athletic quarterback. So if you can have the athletic quarterback, you can't take care of everybody. You can't cover everybody. You can't keep your eyes on everybody. And then 3rd and 8, quarterback ran for 9 yards, slid down, first down, reset the chains.
I just think the state of where offensive line plays in the league forces it even further into this direction. There are very few offensive lines where you can just sit back there, be a pure pocket passer, and just rock it and go, because they're not good enough, and defenses are becoming really, really efficient when it comes to rushing the passer and knowing where the quarterback's going to be. And when they know where you're going to be, they can design all kinds of exotic pressure packages when they know exactly where their guy has to get to. The athleticism piece, the ability to move the pocket, the various things you can do, at least presents a little bit of doubt in the back of their mind, where they have to at least be more conscientious of the different threats that one can offer. And that's part of the reason the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson in the first place, because he was athletic. A lot of people want to view this through who is the Kirk Cousinsiest quarterback for the Browns to go get, which is part of the reason I think a lot of people keep trying to match them with Shedeur Sanders in terms of a guy who operates from the pocket and is efficient and accurate and all those things. But the way the league is gone, it's really difficult to do that. Tom Brady is gone. You don't have the best processor maybe the game has ever seen. So if you're demanding that out of your quarterback, it's a really, really high bar to clear. Whereas mobility and the various things you can do with offensively not only open up your running game, but just make your quarterback's likelihood of reaching success fast, more quickly, which is super important for the Browns or most any team. Like, the regime changes happen so quickly, and there's so little stability that you got to get guys in there and get them to succeed fast. So getting athletes is certainly a way to do it. It doesn't always work out. You still got to find the right kid in terms of being willing to improve, being coachable, being able to put in the work and all those other things, which is why you have a guy like Anthony Richardson, which looks like a complete and utter disaster for the Colts to this point. I'm not going to say he can't be good, but it just, if it's true that they're actively looking to trade him again, then that is obviously the nightmare scenario. But I think the Browns want to get somebody that can that can offer more athletic ability. And, when you're in a division where you have to deal with Trey Hendrickson until he's gone, and hopefully to a very nice NFC team where the Browns never have to see him, but you still have TJ Watt, you still have Alex Highsmith, you still have, those type of players, and the Ravens allegedly have somebody that can rush the passer. You've got to be able to have somebody that can sort of help you in that scenario.
No question. Look, big day here, obviously. The Browns, Andrew Berry, ownership, everybody stayed in line, did not blink, and got something to go the way they thought it was going to go. Most importantly, and, I'm sure there will be some sort of presser, and it'll certainly be interesting, to hear Myles speak at said presser after the things that went on the last couple of weeks. He's getting certainly, what he was, at the end of the day, it was always going to be about the money. Did he want to leave? Probably a good chance he did want to leave. Was it going to happen? And were the Browns going to destroy their own organization to appease one? It just wasn't going to happen. Browns get it done. Myles Garrett, largest non-quarterback contract in NFL history. We'll see how long, of course, that holds up, because we know how this works in this league or whatever. We are here. We're recording this on Sunday, noon, Monday. The legal tampering after the non-legal tampering has been going on since Indianapolis, of course. And basically, 2025, the NFL season, and certainly your Cleveland Browns, are open for business. He is Pete Smith. I am Jeff Lloyd. Browns 3D on the OBR is brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Again, just want to thank everybody. It's nice to see people come out and support and give the kudos and give the flowers. It is. So we appreciate you all for that. I know I got some, and I see Pete's name out there. I see Brad, Casey, a whole bunch of others out there. It's nice when people will support you, and obviously, we know how much you guys pour into coming to the OBR written, reading the written content. Of course, the streams. Subscribe on YouTube. Of course, subscribe over on Twitch as well. We will definitely be around, ready to go tomorrow. Hope it's not like day one a few years ago when the only nugget that was dropped, I believe, was Taven Bryant, as everybody sat around all day waiting for free agent news, and all you got with Taven Bryant. All that being said, of course, thanks again. This has been Browns 3D on the OBR, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.